Captain Sarah Mitchell had always known she was different, though she never expected it would define her entire career. From the moment she walked into flight school, the whispers began soft, dismissive murmurs that carried more weight than she realized. Women can't handle Apaches, one instructor said offhandedly, tapping the side of the sleek, black aircraft like it were some untouchable relic. It's too complex, too unforgiving, too dangerous for someone like her. Sarah didn't respond. She simply studied the helicopter with quiet intensity, memorizing every gauge, every lever, every movement it demanded. She would prove them wrong, not with words, but with action. The AH-64 Apache was a beast, a mechanical predator, designed for war, precision, and destruction. It wasn't enough to simply fly it. A pilot had to think 3 moves ahead, anticipate every danger, every variable, and remain unflinching in the face of death. Sarah had spent months in simulators, navigating virtual battlefields with precision that left instructors astonished. Her scores weren't just high, they were consistently perfect. Yet still, the whispers lingered. She'd crack under pressure. She smiled to herself whenever she heard it. Pressure was a thing she thrived under. Pressure shaped her, molded her, sharpened her instincts like the edge of a knife. She remembered the first time she climbed into an actual Apache for live maneuvers. The engines roared beneath her, vibrating through her bones. Her hands gripped the controls, feeling the precise tension of the stick, the pedals, the throttle. Around her, other pilots, mostly men, observed her with polite curiosity, some with open skepticism. She could feel the judgment like a weight, pressing down on her shoulders, but she ignored it. Her focus was absolute. Every twist, every turn, every simulated threat in the sky became an extension of her thought process. She wasn't flying a helicopter. She was dancing with it, predicting its moves, guiding it as if it were alive. By the time she earned her Apache wings, Sarah wasn't just capable, she was exceptional. In competitions and evaluations, she routinely outperformed her male counterparts. She could maneuver the helicopter into impossible positions, hit moving targets with uncanny accuracy, and think tactically faster than anyone else in her cohort. Yet, for all her achievements, the stigma lingered. The idea that a woman couldn't handle the most demanding combat aircraft in the world followed her like a shadow. She could silence critics with performance, but some doubts weren't about skill, they were about perception. She had to rewrite what people thought possible. Her assignments after graduation brought her to Fort Hood, one of the largest U.S. Army installations in the world. Here, the reality of combat loomed closer than simulations ever could. She trained day and night, flying countless hours over Texas terrain, mastering high-altitude maneuvers, evasive techniques, and live-fire exercises. Every mission was another test, not just of her ability to operate the Apache, but of her mental fortitude. Every mistake could cost lives, every success could save them. She was always aware that one day, those lessons would be tested in real combat, in a situation that no simulator could replicate. The day came sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence reports flagged a significant enemy presence in a valley of Afghanistan, a strategically vital location where a convoy carrying critical supplies was about to traverse. The reports were chilling. A battalion-sized force, heavily armed, entrenched, and lying in wait for the unsuspecting convoy. The valley was narrow, the cliffs steep, perfect cover for an ambush. Command assessed the situation quickly and made a difficult decision. They needed someone who could handle extreme pressure, think instinctively, and act decisively. And, despite the lingering biases, that someone was Sarah Mitchell. The night before deployment, Sarah barely slept. She walked the tarmac under the pale light of a crescent moon, Apache engines humming faintly in the distance. The enormity of the mission pressed down on her, but she welcomed it. This wasn't just about survival or success. It was about proving, once and for all, that capability knows no gender. She checked her flight plan again and again, memorizing every turn, every ridge, every potential line of fire. Lieutenant Reyes, her co-pilot, noticed her intensity. "You're calm," he remarked. Tension in his voice. Sarah only smiled. "Focused," she corrected. Calm was a luxury. Focus was survival. As dawn broke, the valley below began to take shape in the soft morning light. The convoy rolled forward, engines rattling over dusty terrain, unaware of the danger that awaited. Sarah's hands gripped the flight controls, her eyes scanning every inch of the valley. The Apache systems lit up, detecting heat signatures dotting the cliffs, moving shadows that indicated enemy fighters. Reyes called out positions, numbers escalating quickly. "Too many," he muttered, voice tight. Sarah didn't hesitate. She analyzed the layout instantly. Potential ambush points, angles of attack, escape routes, and lines of sight. Every instinct told her exactly what to do. Every maneuver calculated to protect the convoy while neutralizing the threat. She remembered her instructor's doubts, how they questioned her reflexes, her ability to handle stress, her endurance under fire. None of that mattered now. There was no room for doubt, only action. The valley was a living, breathing battlefield, and she was its master. The Apache responded to her commands like an extension of her own body. She banked sharply, weaving through enemy fire, unleashing the 30mm cannon with precision that shredded cover and scattered insurgents. Explosions flared, smoke rose from scorched earth, and the first shockwave of combat hit the convoy below. The soldiers inside looked up, wide-eyed, as the predator in the sky became their guardian. Minutes stretched into eternity. Every movement required split-second decisions. An RPG streaked past, narrowly missing the rotor, detonating on a cliffside, sending rocks tumbling like rain. Sarah adjusted, calculating trajectories and predicting enemy reactions. Each counterattack she executed was a combination of skill, courage, and split-second intuition. Her focus never wavered, her mind a machine of tactical reasoning. Reyes, seated beside her, couldn't help but voice amazement. "How are you doing this?" He yelled over the roar of engines and gunfire. Sarah's eyes remained locked on the battle below. "Doing what needs to be done," she replied, almost without thinking. Through the chaos, the Apache danced. It climbed, it dove, it weaved, it struck. Mortar positions were obliterated with Hellfire missiles, enemy fighters shredded by cannon fire. Every move was a lesson in precision, every strike a demonstration of control and skill. She was rewriting history in real time, showing that the doubters had been wrong all along. The whispers of "she can't" were drowned out by the roar of engines, explosions, and the undeniable proof of her mastery. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just flying an Apache, she was redefining what it meant to be a warrior in the sky. Even as she neutralized one threat, another emerged. Enemy reinforcements poured from hidden bunkers, RPG squads firing in unison. Sarah adjusted, rolling, diving, and striking with surgical precision. Her mind calculated angles, speed, trajectory, and timing faster than any human could consciously process. Reyes struggled to keep up, shouting target coordinates as Sarah anticipated every move. The valley had become a lethal chessboard, and she was 10 steps ahead. For every enemy soldier attempting an ambush, there was a countermeasure waiting. For every gun aimed at the convoy, there was an answer, fired from the Apache above. Hours could have passed in minutes. The convoy advanced, protected by the relentless force above. Soldiers whispered tales of the pilot in the sky, a ghostly figure of precision and power. Explosions shook the valley, Smoke obscured the landscape, yet Sarah remained focused, unwavering. She knew the mission wasn't over until the battalion was broken, until the command structure of the enemy was destroyed. Every maneuver, every strike, every calculated risk had been leading to a single objective: victory. And she would see it through, not for recognition, but for the lives depending on her from the ground. By the time the sun rose high, the Apache had become an unstoppable force. The valley, once a trap, had turned into Sarah's domain. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, the kind only warriors know when facing overwhelming odds and surviving. She had silenced every doubter in her mind, proven her ability beyond argument. But she also knew this was just the beginning. The ambush was larger than expected, and the enemy still had command centers that needed elimination. Still, in that moment, Captain Sarah Mitchell had claimed victory over perception, fear, and the limits imposed by others. And as she banked the Apache to assess the next stage, a quiet determination settled in her chest. This was more than a mission. It was a declaration. Skill, courage, and intelligence knew no gender. Every time someone whispered that women couldn't, she had a living, breathing, roaring counterexample flying above the battlefield. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a pilot. She was a storm, a force of nature, a symbol of what happens when preparation, skill, and courage collide. The Apache's engines thrummed beneath her, carrying not just weapons, but a message. She was unstoppable. The convoy rumbled through the valley, unaware of the storm above. Dust rose in clouds behind armored trucks, glinting in the morning sun as if the earth itself were warning of danger. Captain Sarah Mitchell's eyes scanned every inch of the terrain, her pulse sensed with the Apache's powerful rotors. The cliffs on either side of the valley rose like jagged teeth, perfect cover for enemy combatants lying in wait. Sarah could see the faint heat signatures now, dozens at first, then hundreds. RPG teams crouched behind rocks. Mortar squads adjusted tubes to target the convoy. Machine guns bristled along the ridges. Lieutenant Reyes, her co-pilot and confidant, tapped the console nervously. "Sarah, they're more prepared than intelligence indicated," he said, voice tight. His eyes flicked from the thermal screens to the valley below. He had flown many missions, seen his share of ambushes, but nothing prepared him for the scale of what lay ahead. Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she analyzed every enemy position, their angles of fire, and potential weaknesses. She traced their patrol patterns in her mind, anticipating every possible move. "We've got this," she said quietly. More to steady herself than him. The Apache banked sharply, dropping closer to the cliffside. Shadows shifted as insurgents moved into firing positions. Sarah's fingers danced over the controls, weaving the helicopter like a master artist with brush and canvas. A 30mm cannon burst shredded the first mortar team, rocks flying in a storm of smoke and debris. Below, the convoy hesitated, unsure whether the explosions were their salvation or a signal of their doom. Sarah's voice cut over the radio. "Hold position. Covering fire incoming." The words were calm, precise, but carried authority that left no room for panic. Then it began the first wave of rockets. They streaked across the sky like flaming arrows, aimed at armored trucks and soldiers who had nowhere to hide. Sarah flared the Apache, twisting violently to avoid impact, the aircraft shuddering under near misses. One RPG exploded just below, sending shockwaves through the valley, knocking loose boulders that rolled toward the convoy. Another streaked past the cockpit glass, missing by mere inches. Reyes' eyes widened, hand gripping the console. "I've never seen anything like this," he shouted. Sarah's response was immediate. Dive, roll, counterfire. Every move calculated to turn threat into opportunity. The valley erupted in chaos. Explosions rocked the cliffs, smoke filling the sky, dust choking the air. The insurgents had expected an easy kill, but they hadn't counted on the one person capable of turning their ambush into a battlefield nightmare. Sarah's Apache became a predator in the sky, relentless and precise. Every cannon burst, every hellfire missile demolished cover and shattered the enemy's momentum. She tracked targets moving under rocks, behind trees, and even inside small bunkers, neutralizing each with clinical accuracy. Reyes kept a running tally. Dozens, no. More than 100, he stammered. Overwhelmed, the convoy soldiers below began to move with newfound confidence, their faith in the pilot above strengthening with every explosion. "Mitchell's up there," one shouted, voice cracking over. "The comes. She's taking care of them." The Apache's roar became a symbol of salvation. Sarah's mind remained razor-sharp, analyzing enemy behavior, predicting their next movements. Insurgents attempted to regroup, forming counter-assault squads to flank the convoy. But each time, Sarah was already 2 steps ahead. Cannon fire shredded their cover. Hellfire missiles eradicated mortar positions before they could launch. She moved like a shadow, striking with deadly efficiency, yet always protecting the convoy. Despite her skill, the threat escalated. Enemy fighters poured out of hidden bunkers and caves, converging from multiple angles. RPGs streaked across the sky in deadly arcs. Machine guns rattled along cliff edges, and mortar rounds pounded the convoy below. Sarah's mind raced through every tactical maneuver she had ever learned. She climbed sharply, banking hard to gain elevation, then unleashed a perfectly timed hellfire strike on a mortar nest. The explosion tore through rock and earth, sending a plume of debris cascading down the cliffs. Another wave of insurgents emerged, but the Apache was already on them, firing with unrelenting precision. Hours seemed to compress into minutes as the battle intensified. The valley, initially a trap, had become a canvas of chaos that Sarah controlled with uncanny mastery. Her reflexes were flawless, her decisions instinctive. She moved low, then high, weaving through smoke and debris, her eyes scanning every ridge and shadow. Each strike was deliberate, each maneuver flawless. Reyes called out target after target, but she anticipated his calls, striking before he even had the chance. The insurgents who thought themselves hunters were now prey. Every ambush attempt was dismantled, every mortar neutralized, every squad intercepted. Yet Sarah knew the mission was far from over. Intelligence had indicated that the battalion wasn't just ambushing the convoy. It was coordinating from a fortified command post on the far ridge. Until that nerve center was destroyed, the threat wasn't neutralized. She could see it now. Through the heat sensors, a fortified bunker surrounded by barricades, soldiers patrolling the perimeter, and equipment poised for counterattack. It was the heart of the enemy force. To strike it would require perfect timing, precision, and nerves of steel. One wrong move, and the Apache or worse. The convoy could be destroyed. Sarah tightened her grip on the controls, her mind running through every possible scenario. She remembered the lessons drilled into her since flight school. Anticipate, dominate, survive. She reviewed every attack vector, every angle of approach, every escape route. Her instincts, honed over years of training and countless simulations, guided her. She communicated with the convoy commanders, adjusting their movements to draw enemy fire away from exposed vehicles while simultaneously preparing for the assault on the command post. Reyes loaded the final hellfire missiles, the tension in the cockpit thick enough to taste. As the Apache approached the far ridge, insurgents opened fire with everything they had left. Machine guns raked the valley floor, RPGs streaked skyward, and mortar pounded the convoy. Sarah dove low, then banked sharply to the side, cannon fire shredding cover and scattering enemy squads. One missile exploded near the bunker's perimeter, collapsing part of the fortification. Sarah adjusted immediately, targeting additional positions with unerring accuracy. The Apache twisted and turned, a whirlwind of destruction, yet never losing control. Reyes couldn't hide his amazement. "I've never seen anyone move like this," he shouted. Sarah's calm voice cut through the chaos. "Just keep watching." The battle waged on, valley to ridge, ridge to valley. Smoke and dust obscured vision. Explosions shook the earth, and the air was thick with adrenaline and tension. Soldiers in the convoy took cover behind armored vehicles, watching the sky for their protector. Every strike from the Apache bolstered their confidence. Sarah was no longer just a pilot. She had become a symbol of hope, a force of retribution. Her maneuvers were flawless, her decisions precise. Each wave of enemy fire was met with an equally calculated response, neutralizing threats before they could harm the convoy. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the Apache reached the ridge. The command post lay before her, heavily fortified and teeming with insurgents. Sarah locked the laser onto the bunker, eyes narrowing. Every past doubter, every whisper of "she can't," flashed through her mind. She gritted her teeth, summoning every ounce of focus and courage. With a steady hand, she released the hellfires. The missiles streaked across the sky with lethal precision, slamming into the fortified position. Explosions ripped through the ridge, sending flames, debris, and panic cascading down. Enemy fighters scattered, their command structure in ruins. Below, the convoy continued its advance, soldiers cheering, adrenaline surging. Sarah banked the Apache, surveying the aftermath. The valley that had threatened annihilation was now under control. The ambush dismantled, the battalion's nerve center destroyed. Reyes let out a long breath. I can't believe it." "You did it," he said, awe in his voice. Sarah remained focused, scanning for any remaining threats. "It's not over until we're out of here," she replied. But deep inside, she felt a surge of quiet triumph. Every doubt, every criticism had been silenced in the roar of engines' explosions. And victory dot as the convoy moved safely past the remnants of the ambush. Sarah guided the Apache to a secure observation point. Dust hung in the air, mingling with smoke and the scent of scorched earth. The valley bore witness to her skill, her courage, and her unwavering determination. For the first time in her career, she felt that all the endless hours of training, the criticism, and the doubt had held a purpose. They hadn't just forged a pilot, they had forged a warrior, capable of defying expectation and rewriting history in real time. The soldiers below would tell stories of that day for years to come. The Apache that roared through the valley, untouchable and unstoppable, was piloted by a woman who had turned impossible odds into a decisive victory. Sarah Mitchell hadn't just survived the ambush, she had annihilated the threat, protected the convoy, and proved that courage, skill, and determination transcended every stereotype and limitation placed upon her. And as she banked the Apache to head back toward base, a sense of purpose settled over her. The mission was complete, but the legend had only just begun. The sun had climbed higher, casting harsh light over the valley, but Sarah Mitchell's focus was sharper than ever. Her eyes flicked across the Apache's console, monitoring every system, every heat signature, every movement on the ground below. The convoy was now safely moving past the remnants of the ambush, but she knew that enemy fighters were still scattered across the ridges, regrouping, looking for a chance to strike. The battalion was fractured, yes, but not entirely defeated. The command post may have been destroyed, but pockets of resistance could still inflict serious damage if not neutralized. Lieutenant Reyes, gripping his console tightly, glanced at her nervously. "Sarah, I don't think they're done yet. They're regrouping on the northeast ridge. Mortar teams and machine guns, probably hoping to catch the convoy in a choke point." His voice trembled slightly, a mixture of awe and fear. Sarah nodded, already calculating trajectories, attack angles, and escape paths in her mind. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Every maneuver she had executed since the mission began had been precise, deliberate, instinctive. This was no longer a defensive flight. It was an offensive sweep, a relentless hunt to eliminate the remaining threat. The Apache banked sharply, dropping low along the valley floor. Dust whipped around the helicopter as its rotors churned the air into a storm of debris. Below, enemy fighters tried to take cover, but Sarah's keen eyes found every silhouette. Her fingers moved with surgical precision over the controls. A short burst of the 30mm cannon tore through the first machine gun nest, sending sparks and rubble into the air. Explosions erupted across the ridge, disorienting enemy soldiers. Reyes was shouting coordinates faster than he could catch them, but Sarah anticipated each position, striking before he could even complete a sentence. She had become a ghost of destruction in the sky. The insurgents attempted to fire back with a volley of RPGs, launching them toward the Apache in hopes of forcing it to retreat. Sarah tilted the helicopter sharply, narrowly avoiding the streaking rockets. One detonated beneath the valley floor, sending boulders tumbling down in a cascade of rock and dust. Another streaked past the cockpit, sending the Apache into a hard roll that would have unseated a less skilled pilot. Her training, instincts, and experience fused into a single seamless reaction. "They can't hit what they can't predict," she muttered under her breath, banking low to engage the next enemy cluster. The valley was alive, the sounds of chaos explosions, gunfire, and the roar of the Apache's engines. Below, the convoy soldiers cheered, seeing their guardian in action. "That's Mitchell. She's unbelievable," one shouted over the comms. Sarah's eyes never left the terrain, her mind running a tactical simulation in real time. Mortar teams shifted positions. Machine guns tried to cover their comrades, but the Apache moved faster, striking with precision that left no room for recovery. She was a predator, her instincts honed to perfection by countless hours of training and the pressure of this very moment. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Enemy squads emerged from hidden caves, only to be met by a precise volley of cannon. Fire, rocks, and debris flew in every direction as the valley became a war zone. One insurgent team attempted a flanking maneuver, moving toward the convoy from the eastern ridge. Sarah banked sharply, lining up the Hellfire missiles. She released one and another, obliterating the position in a thunderous explosion. Smoke and fire engulfed the ridge. Below, the convoy pressed forward, gaining distance. Every strike Sarah executed was a calculated step toward ending the battle completely, ensuring no threat remained. Reyes's voice broke through the roar of the engines. "Sarah, the northeast ridge is almost cleared. Mortar are down, machine guns neutralized, but there's still a cluster of enemy fighters moving toward the western cliff. They might try another ambush." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "We finish this now." She climbed sharply, gaining elevation to survey the western ridge. Heat signatures revealed the hidden enemy soldiers, crouched behind rocks, preparing to fire. Sarah adjusted the Apache's position, the aircraft tilting at impossible angles to gain a clear line of sight. She released the cannon in short, devastating bursts, dismantling cover and scattering enemy fighters in a wave of fire. The insurgents attempted to fire back with concentrated machine gun bursts, but Sarah was always one step ahead. She dipped low, weaving between enemy fire, then climbed high for a clean shot. Every maneuver showcased mastery, precision, and courage under fire. Reyes shouted updates, but she barely registered his voice. The valley below had become an extension of her mind. Every movement, every shadow, every threat was anticipated and countered. The Apache roared like a living weapon, lethal and unstoppable, its pilot untouchable. The convoy advanced steadily, gaining momentum as enemy positions crumbled under Sarah's relentless assault. Soldiers on the ground witnessed a display of combat skill rarely seen in real life. They watched the predator in the sky as it dismantled ambush positions with methodical efficiency. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction as each enemy squad was neutralized. Every mortally flawed plan the insurgents had relied upon was shredded in seconds. She didn't revel in destruction. She reveled in precision, control, and the knowledge that every life in the convoy was now safer because of her. Despite her success, Sarah knew the battle was not yet over. Small groups of insurgents were still active, moving in desperation. One squad tried to regroup along the eastern cliff, hoping to use the remaining cover to ambush stragglers. Sarah reacted instantly. She banked low, cannon fire slicing through rock and sand. Explosions tore through the ridge, scattering enemy fighters. Smoke and debris filled the air, reducing visibility, but Sarah's instincts remained flawless. She adjusted, releasing another Hellfire missile that obliterated the remaining mortar emplacement. The insurgents' morale collapsed under the relentless assault, their coordination falling apart completely. As the valley began to quiet, Sarah allowed herself a brief moment to assess the situation. The convoy had passed the ambush zone largely unscathed. Enemy positions were destroyed or fleeing, and the Apache's dominance in the air had ensured a clear path forward. Reyes let out a shaky breath. Sarah, that was insane. You saved them all. Sarah's face remained stoic, her focus unwavering. The mission isn't over until every threat is eliminated, she replied, scanning the terrain for any remaining enemy presence. The battle was far from finished, but the tide had decisively turned. The insurgents' remaining forces were fleeing toward hidden valleys and caves, their cohesion broken. Sarah followed the movements from above, calculating her next strikes. She executed a series of precise maneuvers, targeting isolated groups before they could regroup or escape. Each Hellfire missile, each burst of cannon fire, further dismantled the remnants of the enemy battalion. The valley, which had once seemed like a trap, was now under her control. Her mastery of the Apache, combined with her tactical acumen, had turned a deadly ambush into a controlled battlefield. By late morning, the Apache had become the ultimate instrument of dominance. Every enemy position that had once threatened the convoy had been neutralized. Sarah had proven not only to her doubters, but to herself, that skill, courage, and intelligence were far more important than gender. Her hands remained steady on the controls as she guided the helicopter across the valley floor, surveying the destruction below. The mission had been more intense than anything she had ever faced, but she had emerged unbroken, unshaken, and victorious. As the convoy moved past the final ridge, soldiers cheered, the sound carried faintly to the Apache. Above, Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe, taking in the scene, the valley, once a death trap, now littered with the remnants of insurgent forces, yet the convoy safe and moving forward. Reyes glanced at her with wide eyes. I've never seen anything like this, he said. Sarah only nodded, scanning for any remaining threats. The battle had been brutal, intense, and chaotic, but she had maintained complete control. Every doubt, every whispered criticism, had been silenced by her skill and determination. As the sun climbed higher, casting light over the shattered valley, Sarah Mitchell prepared for the next phase of the operation. While the convoy was safe, her mission was far from complete. The enemy had been fractured, their command post destroyed, but pockets of resistance still remained. Her eyes narrowed, the fire of determination blazing within. The Apache thrummed beneath her, responding to every thought, every instinct. She had proven herself capable beyond any doubt, but she also knew that the battle wasn't finished. There was still work to be done, still enemies to neutralize. Sarah Mitchell's eyes never wavered from the valley below. The convoy had cleared the worst of the ambush, but small pockets of enemy forces still lurked along the ridges and in hidden caves. They were scattered, disorganized, but still dangerous. Sarah knew from experience that even a handful of determined insurgents could strike at the wrong time and cause catastrophic damage. Every second she hesitated could give them the opportunity to regroup. She adjusted the Apache's altitude, dipping low over the ridge to get a better view of the terrain. Lieutenant Reyes's voice cut through the roar of the rotors. "Sarah, there's movement on the northwest ridge. Mortar teams, maybe 2 squads trying to flank the convoy." His tone carried tension, the adrenaline of combat evident in every word. Sarah didn't respond verbally. Her hands moved over the controls with calm precision, already anticipating the angle of approach, the arc of their fire, and the trajectory of her counterstrike. She banked the Apache, dipping down the side of the cliff, a shadow against the rocky walls, as if the machine itself were alive, hunting its prey. The insurgents fired first, RPGs streaking toward the Apache like fiery arrows. Sarah reacted instantly, rolling the aircraft, narrowly avoiding the first rocket. Another exploded behind her, sending dust and boulders tumbling down the slope. The valley itself seemed alive with danger. Yet every movement she made was deliberate, precise, and fearless. "We've got this," she muttered under her breath. Reyes shot her a wide-eyed glance. "I don't know how you do this." "It's insane." She didn't answer. Focus was absolute. Every instinct, every decision, every split-second maneuver was calculated to protect the convoy and dismantle the enemy completely. She unleashed a series of short, controlled bursts from the 30mm cannon. Sparks flew as rocks shattered, and the first mortar team erupted in flames. Enemy soldiers scattered, scrambling for cover, but there was nowhere to hide. The Apache twisted and banked, dipping low to sweep the ridge before climbing sharply to avoid the next volley of RPGs. Reyes frantically called out additional targets, but Sarah was already a step ahead, preempting each threat before it could fully form. The insurgents who had once thought themselves hunters now realized they were the hunted. The valley became a theater of destruction. Explosions shook the cliffs, sending debris cascading like rain onto the convoy below. Smoke hung thick in the air, mingling with dust and gunfire. Sarah adjusted her flight path, anticipating enemy movements. Another squad attempted a flanking maneuver along the eastern ridge, trying to find a blind spot in her defense. Sarah dipped low, unleashing a Hellfire missile that obliterated their cover. The blast sent a shockwave through the terrain, collapsing a portion of the ridge and scattering enemy fighters. The Apache moved like a phantom, untouchable, precise, and devastating. The soldiers in the convoy began to cheer, seeing their protector in action. "Mitchell's up there. She's a god," one shouted, adrenaline and awe evident in his voice. Sarah allowed herself only a brief nod, scanning for the next threat. The insurgents tried again, regrouping and attempting to use the valleys. Natural cover to their advantage. Sarah anticipated their strategy, cutting them off with sudden, unexpected maneuvers. The 30mm cannon roared, shredding rocks in cover, scattering the remaining mortar and machine guns. Every action reinforced a single undeniable fact: Sarah Mitchell was unmatched in the sky, a force capable of turning chaos into order. As the engagement continued, the Apache became both predator and shield. Sarah had developed a rhythm, anticipating enemy attacks and countering with preemptive strikes. Reyes's voice grew increasingly frantic as he called out targets, but Sarah barely needed him now. She had become one with the helicopter, her instincts and training fused seamlessly with the machine systems. Each maneuver was executed with deadly precision, rolling, banking, firing, and climbing in a deadly dance of survival and dominance. The insurgents' morale crumbled as their squads were annihilated one by one. The once formidable battalion now existed only in scattered remnants, desperate and uncoordinated. Yet Sarah knew the real threat remained, the central command post, the nerve center orchestrating the ambush. Until it was destroyed, the battle wasn't truly won. She guided the Apache to a high vantage point above the ridge, scanning for heat signatures and assessing defensive positions. The bunker was heavily fortified, surrounded by soldiers and makeshift barricades. To strike it required perfect timing and nerves of steel. One miscalculation could expose the convoy to danger, or worse, result in the loss of the helicopter. Sarah adjusted her flight path, calculating angles of attack with meticulous precision. The insurgents spotted her from the ridge and opened fire with machine guns, mortar, and RPGs. Sarah dipped low, weaving between enemy fire, her body tense, her mind razor-sharp. She released a Hellfire missile on a mortar team attempting to line up another shot. The explosion tore through the ridge, collapsing part of the bunker's defensive wall. Smoke and fire engulfed the area. Another missile followed, striking a machine gun nest and reducing the position to rubble. Below, convoy soldiers witnessed the Apache's precision and power firsthand, their fear replaced by awe. Sarah's presence alone had turned certain death into survival. The remaining insurgents tried to flee, moving into caves and crevices, hoping to escape her wrath. Sarah tracked their movement with the Apache's thermal sensors, engaging each group systematically. Cannon fire erupted in controlled bursts, blasting rocks and sand, while hellfires destroyed fortified positions. The Apache twisted and rolled, a whirlwind of destruction and control, every action preplanned yet executed instinctively. Reyes, still struggling to keep up, watched in disbelief. "She's unstoppable," he muttered. Sarah didn't respond. Focus was all that mattered. Precision, timing, and survival were her only priorities. Hours passed like minutes as the battle raged on. The valley, once a death trap for the convoy, was now under Sarah's control. Enemy forces were fractured, morale shattered, and command dismantled. Soldiers in the convoy looked up at the Apache in awe, cheering for their guardian angel in the sky. Each maneuver she executed, each precise strike, reinforced the impossible. A woman flying an Apache could dominate the battlefield, dismantle an ambush, and protect countless lives. Doubters who whispered she can't had been silenced by the roar of engines, cannon fire, and the sheer effectiveness of her tactics. Despite the victory, Sarah remained vigilant. Small groups of insurgents still lingered, attempting last-ditch ambushes or sniper positions. She methodically hunted each one, combining low-level strafing runs with precise hellfire strikes. The Apache moved like a living weapon, responding to her every instinct. Reyes called out positions frantically, but she anticipated each threat, striking before he could complete his sentence. The insurgents were no match. What had started as a dangerous ambush had become a controlled battlefield under Sarah Mitchell's mastery. As the convoy finally reached safer terrain, the Apache banked high above, surveying the valley. Smoke rose from destroyed positions. Debris scattered across the ridges, and the once imposing ambush had been reduced to chaos and ruin. Reyes allowed himself a long breath. "Sarah, you did it. Every single one of them gone." Sarah remained calm, scanning for any lingering threats. Her training, instincts, and courage had turned the tide. Every enemy that remained had no organization, no morale, no chance. She had dominated the battlefield, proving skill and determination could overcome any obstacle. As the sun climbed higher over the valley, Sarah prepared for the final phase of the mission, securing the area and ensuring the convoy's complete safety. Her mind calculated every remaining threat, every possible ambush point, and every escape route. She was methodical, precise, and unstoppable. The Apache responded to her every thought, a perfect extension of her skill and focus. The valley had tested her, pushed her to the limits of endurance and skill, but she had emerged victorious. And above it all, she knew her journey had only begun. The battle was over, but her legend was only starting. The valley had quieted, but Sarah Mitchell knew better than to let her guard down. Even fractured, the enemy was still dangerous. Small groups of insurgents scurried through caves and crevices, desperate to regroup or launch one last ambush. The convoy had passed the worst, but a single coordinated strike could still cause catastrophic damage. Sarah banked the Apache sharply, her eyes scanning every shadow, every heat signature, every ridge. She moved like a predator, invisible yet lethal, calculating trajectories, attack angles, and escape routes in an instant. Lieutenant Reyes's voice broke the tense silence. "Sarah, we've got at least 3 RPG teams moving to the western ridge. If they get line of sight on the convoy," he didn't finish. Sarah had already calculated the vectors. She dipped low, swooping under the overhangs, weaving through the cliffs with the agility of a skilled aerial dancer. The first RPG streaked past, detonating harmlessly on the rocky slope. The second barely missed. The third, a bright fireball, exploded beneath the Apache, rattling it violently. Warning lights flared, alarms blared, but Sarah's focus remained absolute. She gritted her teeth and replied calmly, "We neutralize them before they fire again." Her fingers flew over the controls, unleashing the 30mm cannon with short, controlled bursts. Rocks and sand exploded in every direction. The RPG teams were annihilated before they could reload. Smoke and debris filled the valley, but she wasn't done. Sarah banked the Apache sharply, twisting and turning, anticipating enemy movement before it could occur. The insurgents' morale was collapsing, but Sarah wanted to ensure the threat was entirely eliminated. The convoy below began to gain confidence, moving steadily through the valley under the protection of the relentless Apache. Soldiers shouted and cheered over the combs, witnessing a level of skill rarely seen in combat. "Mitchell's up there," one yelled. "She's untouchable." Sarah allowed herself a brief nod, but didn't celebrate. There was no room for error. The remaining insurgents were desperate, unpredictable, and deadly. She adjusted her flight path, scanning for hidden caves, sniper positions, and improvised firing points. Every potential threat was accounted for, every move calculated with razor-sharp precision. Hours of intense aerial combat had fused Sarah and the Apache into a single entity. Reflexes and strategy were one. Instinct and technology were inseparable. She anticipated every enemy maneuver, every hidden ambush, every attempt to strike the convoy. Another group tried to emerge from a cliffside cave, hoping for a surprise attack. Sarah rolled the Apache hard, unleashing a Hellfire missile that obliterated the entrance. Rocks cascaded down, masking the remaining enemy positions with dust and debris. Her control was flawless, every strike decisive. Reyes shouted in disbelief, I can't believe what I'm seeing." Sarah only nodded, eyes scanning the next target. The insurgents' desperation escalated. They launched coordinated attacks from multiple angles, machine guns and mortar, converging on the Apache. In a deadly volley, Sarah responded with fluid maneuvers, climbing, banking, diving, twisting the helicopter an extension of her will. Hellfire missiles streaked from under her wings, and the cannon roared, each shot shredding cover, scattering enemy squads, and neutralizing mortar before they could fire. She moved with precision and speed that made it impossible for the enemy to react effectively. They were caught in a relentless trap of air power and tactical brilliance. Amidst the chaos, one insurgent squad attempted a last-ditch maneuver, sprinting toward an elevated position to fire directly on the convoy. Sarah banked low, diving toward them like a striking hawk. The cannon erupted in controlled bursts, tearing through rocks and dirt, scattering the squad. The explosion sent a plume of smoke and debris skyward, masking the convoy below. Race's voice was almost hysterical. "They're trying everything. You're insane." Sarah gritted her teeth, eyes locked on the next heat signature. "Focus. We finish this," she said. Her calm under fire was as much a weapon as the Apache's firepower. The valley shook under the repeated explosions, debris tumbling down cliffs, smoke choking visibility, and the roar of engines filling the air. Below, convoy soldiers pressed forward with growing confidence, witnessing a display of aerial dominance. That seemed almost unreal. Sarah's focus was absolute. Every enemy movement was anticipated, every firing angle countered, every potential threat neutralized before it could manifest. She was a predator in the sky, relentless and unstoppable. Her instincts and skill exceeding anything Lieutenant Reyes had ever seen. Even as she cleared the western ridge, Sarah knew the final threat remained, the battalion's remaining command units and remaining mortar nests. They had been weakened, but were still capable of coordinated attacks. Sarah assessed the terrain, identifying positions that could launch counterattacks against both the convoy and her Apache. She formulated a plan, a combination of high-speed strafing runs, pinpoint hellfire strikes, and calculated dives to flush out hidden squads. Reyes loaded the missiles while she aligned the Apache for maximum efficiency and impact. Every move had to be precise. There was no margin for error. The first hellfire hit a hidden mortar emplacement, triggering a secondary explosion that destroyed nearby cover. Cannon fire shredded rocks and sand, scattering enemy fighters. Another hellfire obliterated a machine gun nest perched on the cliff edge. Sarah's maneuvers were fluid, instinctive, and lethal. The remaining insurgents tried to flee through caves and crevices, but she anticipated every exit point, striking each group with precision. The valley that had once been a deadly trap was now under her complete control. The convoy's safety was ensured, and the enemy had been dismantled with surgical efficiency. Hours of continuous aerial combat had pushed Sarah and Reyes to the limits of endurance, yet she remained focused, precise, and unflinching. She guided the Apache over the valley one last time, scanning for stragglers, ensuring that no enemy had been overlooked. Every squad, every mortar, every weapon cache was accounted for and neutralized. Reyes could barely keep up, his voice cracking. As he called out targets, I don't know how you're doing this." Sarah didn't respond verbally. She was already plotting the final moves needed to secure complete victory. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the valley fell silent. Smoke and dust rose from destroyed positions. Debris littered the ridges, and the once powerful battalion was reduced to scattered remnants. The convoy continued forward, now safe from any remaining threat. Reyes let out a shaky breath. We did it. Every single one of them." Sarah scanned the area one last time, her eyes steady. "Not until we leave this zone completely." "Secure," she replied. But deep inside, she allowed herself a flicker of satisfaction. The impossible had been accomplished, and she had done it flawlessly. As the convoy reached safer ground, soldiers cheered and radioed their gratitude. "Mitchell's the best we've ever seen," one shouted. Sarah allowed herself a moment of recognition, not for glory, but to confirm that every life in the convoy had been protected. She had turned what could have been a catastrophic ambush into a decisive victory, proving once again that her skill, courage, and determination transcended any stereotype or expectation. The Apache descended from its predator-like patrol, returning to base as the valley bore witness to her dominance. Even as she guided the Apache home, Sarah's mind remained sharp, scanning for threats and anticipating potential danger. She knew that even a single misstep could undo the success of the mission. Her eyes flicked across thermal images, her hands adjusting controls with precision. Every remaining insurgent had been neutralized or scattered, but her vigilance never wavered. The mission wasn't complete until the convoy was entirely secure, and she intended to see it through without compromise. By late morning, the valley was a testament to Sarah Mitchell's skill and precision. Enemy forces were shattered, their morale destroyed, and their command structure obliterated. The convoy was safe, moving steadily toward base. The Apache, though battered from near misses and constant maneuvers, remained a formidable weapon in her hands. Reyes looked at her, awe and exhaustion evident in his eyes. You just changed everything. They'll never doubt a woman in an Apache again." Sarah allowed herself a small smile, though her focus remained. The helicopter's engines thrummed beneath her, a reminder of the power she controlled. The battle had tested every ounce of her training, every skill she had honed over years. And yet, through precision, courage, and unshakable focus, she had dominated the battlefield, protected the convoy, and rewritten what was thought possible. She wasn't just a pilot, she was a force of nature, a symbol of what skill, determination, and courage could achieve. The Apache was no longer just a weapon. It was an extension of her mastery and resolve. Sarah Mitchell's eyes scanned the valley as the convoy began to clear the final ridge. The battle had left destruction in its wake, smoke curling from destroyed mortar positions, jagged rocks scattered across the slopes, and remnants of fortified enemy positions smoldering in the sun. Yet Sarah knew better than to relax. Even fractured and disoriented, the enemy was unpredictable. One squad hiding in a crevice could still fire a well-aimed RPG or set off an ambush that could cripple the convoy. Her mind raced, calculating angles, trajectories, and defensive maneuvers before the insurgents could even think. Lieutenant Reyes' voice crackled over the comms, tense but awed. "Sarah, we're picking up heat signatures near the northern ridge, small squads moving fast. They're trying to regroup." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She banked the Apache sharply, dipping low to gain a vantage point. The first squad emerged from a rocky outcrop, attempting to flank the convoy from the side. Without hesitation, she released a precise burst of 30mm cannon fire. Rocks and sand erupted in a chaotic storm as insurgents scattered, scrambling for cover. The precision was flawless. The strike was decisive. The enemy's desperation grew as they realized the Apache wasn't just a threat, it was an unstoppable force. RPGs streaked across the sky, machine guns rattled, and mortar tubes fired in frantic volleys. Sarah banked hard, rolling the helicopter to avoid the incoming rockets. One detonated barely feet below, sending a shockwave that rattled the aircraft. Another exploded near a cliff edge, causing debris to cascade toward the convoy. Her hands moved instinctively, each maneuver a split second. Calculation. Reyes' voice trembled with excitement and fear. "I don't know how you're surviving this." Sarah kept her focus. "We survive because we predict every move before it happens." The Apache twisted and rolled, weaving through the chaos with lethal precision. Hellfire missiles streaked across the sky, obliterating hidden mortar nests and machine gun positions. Cannon fire shredded rocks and debris, neutralizing the enemy's last attempts at coordinated attacks. The valley was alive with the sound of explosions, engine roar, and the relentless fury of combat. Yet through it all, Sarah remained calm, calculating, and decisive. Each maneuver, each shot, each strategic choice was executed with surgical precision, leaving no room for error. The convoy below moved with growing confidence, their trust in Sarah absolute. Soldiers shouted and cheered over the combs, witnessing what seemed like near miraculous control of the battlefield. "Mitchell's up there. She's untouchable," one soldier yelled. Sarah allowed herself only a brief glance at the convoy. Their safety was her primary concern, but she remained hyper-aware of the remaining enemy forces. Small squads attempted to flee into caves and crevices, hoping to regroup, but Sarah anticipated every escape route. Hellfire missiles struck with deadly accuracy, and cannon fire scattered the remaining fighters, leaving them with no cover, no options, no hope. Hours of relentless combat had sharpened Sarah's instincts to an almost supernatural level. She anticipated every movement, every attempt at ambush, and every trajectory of enemy fire. Another insurgent squad tried to ascend a cliffside, hoping to rain machine gun fire down on the convoy. Sarah adjusted, swooping low and releasing a Hellfire missile that obliterated the squad and collapsed a portion of the cliff. Dust and debris cascaded down, covering their retreat and signaling the end of the enemy's last coordinated effort. The Apache twisted and rolled above the chaos, precise, deadly, and untouchable. Even as the last of the insurgent forces attempted to flee, Sarah knew the operation wasn't fully complete. Pockets of hidden fighters, improvised ambush points, and sniper positions could still pose a threat. She methodically scanned the terrain, using the Apache's thermal sensors and intelligence feeds to identify any remaining danger. Her hands moved over the controls with fluidity and precision, executing low-level strafing runs, pinpoint missile strikes, and strategic positioning to flesh out any last pockets of resistance. Each move was deliberate, decisive, and flawless. The insurgents were cornered, disorganized, and demoralized. Machine guns, mortar, and RPGs were reduced to scattered, ineffective fire as Sarah systematically cleared the battlefield. The Apache moved like a living weapon, its pilot anticipating every action before it occurred. Reyes called out positions, but Sarah anticipated the enemy's every move. Cannon fire erupted in short, controlled bursts, sending rocks, sand, and debris flying in every direction. Hellfire missiles obliterated the last fortified positions. The valley, which had once been a death trap, was now under her complete control. Finally, the northern ridge fell silent. Smoke and dust rose from destroyed positions. Debris littered the slopes, and the remaining insurgents were fleeing in disarray. The convoy had reached a secure position, its soldiers now confident and safe. Reyes allowed himself a long, exhausted breath. "Sarah, we've cleared them all. Every last one." Sarah's eyes scanned the valley one last time, unwavering, calculating. "Not until we're out of this zone completely," she said, though satisfaction flickered across her face. The impossible had been achieved. The ambush had been neutralized, and the convoy was unharmed. The soldiers below cheered, radioing praise and gratitude. "Mitchell's the best. She saved us all," one shouted. Sarah allowed herself a brief nod, but remained focused. The mission was far from over. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, she needed to secure the area and prepare for any remaining insurgent retaliation. Every detail mattered. Every potential ambush point had to be accounted for, and the Apache remained her weapon, shield, and extension of her tactical genius. As the convoy moved forward, Sarah guided the Apache to a high vantage point, surveying the valley from above. Smoke and dust rose from destroyed positions, and the shattered remains of the enemy's ambush littered the terrain. The valley had been transformed from a trap into a controlled battlefield. Sarah's mastery of the Apache had turned the tide, annihilating enemy forces with precision and protecting countless lives. Her reputation, once questioned by whispered doubts, was now firmly cemented in reality. She had proven her skill, courage, and determination beyond any doubt. Even as the battle ended, Sarah remained vigilant. Heat signatures revealed a few stragglers attempting to flee through hidden caves. She adjusted her altitude and deployed a Hellfire missile, targeting the last remaining insurgents and ensuring the convoy's complete safety. Cannon fire shredded the surrounding rocks to prevent any potential return fire. The valley, once a symbol of danger and ambush, now stood as a testament to her skill and dominance. Every move had been calculated, every threat neutralized. Lieutenant Reyes shook his head in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like this." You're a legend." Sarah allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Legends don't exist in the middle of a battle," she said. "We survive, we protect, we finish the mission. That's all that matters." Her voice was calm, measured, unshaken by the chaos around them. The Apache banked, engines humming, as they prepared to return to base. The battle had tested her in every way imaginable, and she had emerged victorious. By the time the convoy reached the safe zone, the valley had been completely secured. Enemy forces were destroyed or scattered, their morale shattered, and the ambush dismantled. The soldiers within the convoy cheered for their guardian above, their confidence restored. Sarah Mitchell had proven herself not only capable but extraordinary. She had turned an impossible ambush into a decisive victory, rewriting expectations and shattering stereotypes. The Apache thrummed beneath her, a weapon of precision and power, a symbol of her unmatched skill. As the sun climbed higher, casting light over the valley, Sarah prepared to guide the Apache home. The mission had tested every ounce of her skill, courage, and endurance. Yet through precision, focus, and relentless determination, she had dominated the battlefield. Her hands remained steady on the controls as she scanned for any remaining threats. Every last insurgent had been neutralized. The convoy was safe. And above it all, one fact remained indisputable. Captain Sarah Mitchell had proven that skill and determination transcended every limitation imposed by others. The valley lay in ruins beneath Sarah Mitchell's watchful eyes. Smoke still curled from shattered enemy positions. Dust hung thick in the air, and the jagged cliffs bore the scars of countless explosions. The convoy had passed safely, but Sarah knew the mission was not yet over. Even the scattered remnants of the insurgent battalion could regroup, launch a last-ditch attack, or strike at the vulnerable convoy vehicles. Her hands gripped the Apache controls with unwavering focus, every movement precise, every decision deliberate. There was no room for error. Lieutenant Reyes, seated beside her, barely dared to breathe. "Sarah, there's movement near the eastern ridge. Small squads, maybe 5, maybe 10. They're trying to sneak up on the convoy." His voice trembled with a mix of fear and awe. Sarah's eyes narrowed, scanning the terrain with unrelenting precision. She banked the Apache sharply, dipping low over the cliffs, weaving through the terrain like a predator stalking prey. Her mind calculated trajectories, angles of fire, escape routes, and timing all at once. Every instinct, every training exercise she'd ever performed, was now being tested in real combat. The insurgents struck first, launching a volley of RPGs, aimed at the convoy below. Sarah dove, twisting the Apache to avoid the incoming rockets. One exploded just beneath the rotors, rattling the aircraft violently. Another streaked past the cockpit, grazing the fuselage. Warning alarms blared, but her hands moved instinctively, countering every threat. "Hold steady," she muttered, under her breath. "We finish this now." Reyes shouted updates, but Sarah anticipated every move before he could speak. The Apache's 30mm cannon erupted in precise bursts, shredding rocks and scattering the enemy squad before they could fire another round. The valley erupted in chaos. Explosions tore through cliffside positions, sending boulders tumbling down. Toward the convoy, smoke filled the air, mingling with dust and the roar of engines. Sarah banked sharply, releasing a Hellfire missile that obliterated a hidden mortar emplacement. Another followed, destroying a machine gun nest perched on a rocky outcrop. The insurgents' morale crumbled as their cover was destroyed and every plan dismantled. Below, the convoy moved with renewed confidence, soldiers cheering and shouting over the comms. "That's Mitchell." "She's untouchable," one yelled. Hours of relentless combat had sharpened Sarah's instincts to perfection. She anticipated enemy movements before they occurred, countering with devastating precision. Another squad tried to flank the convoy along the northern ridge, hoping to catch the soldiers off guard. Sarah rolled the Apache hard, releasing a Hellfire missile that obliterated their position and sent debris cascading down the slope. Cannon fire shredded nearby rocks, scattering the insurgents further. Reyes called out targets frantically, but Sarah was already one step ahead, striking before they could react. The remaining fighters were now trapped, disoriented, and desperate. Even as the last pockets of insurgents attempted to flee, Sarah knew the operation wasn't complete. Hidden caves, sniper nests, and improvised firing positions could still pose a deadly threat. She methodically scanned the terrain, deploying Hellfire missiles and firing controlled cannon bursts to neutralize any remaining enemies. Every strike was calculated to protect the convoy and eliminate threats without leaving openings for retaliation. The Apache moved like a living weapon, responding to her instincts and training as if anticipating her thoughts. The valley, once a death trap, was now firmly under her control. The insurgents' desperation escalated. They launched sporadic attacks from multiple angles, hoping to catch the Apache off guard. Mortar fired in wild arcs, machine guns rattled, and RPGs streaked across the sky. Sarah twisted the Apache, diving and climbing in fluid, impossible maneuvers. Each missile strike, each burst of cannon fire, dismantled enemy positions systematically. Rocks tumbled down cliffs, smoke obscured vision, but Sarah's focus never wavered. She anticipated every move, striking decisively, eliminating threats before they could become a problem. A valley had become her domain, the Apache an extension of her will. The convoy moved steadily, now fully trusting their guardian in the hour. Sky, soldiers cheered as insurgents were annihilated, watching the Apache weave between explosions and incoming fire. "She's a god," one yelled. But Sarah remained focused, scanning for any remaining enemy activity. Small squads tried to hide in crevices, but thermal sensors betrayed their positions. Hellfire missiles struck, cannon fire shredded cover, and the insurgents' last attempts at resistance were neutralized. The once dominant battalion was now shattered, reduced to scattered remnants with no coordination, no morale, and no hope. Hours of combat had fused Sarah and the Apache into a single entity. Reflexes and strategy were indistinguishable, every decision calculated, yet executed instinctively. The enemy had attempted a flanking maneuver along the eastern ridge, but Sarah anticipated it before it could take shape. She swooped low, releasing precise cannon bursts and missiles, eliminating the squad instantly. Dust and debris filled the air, masking their retreat. Below, the convoy moved forward with growing confidence, witnessing a level of aerial combat skill they had never seen before. Even as the last remaining insurgents fled, Sarah remained vigilant. Heat signatures revealed a small group attempting to escape through a hidden cave. She adjusted the Apache's altitude, lining up a perfect shot. A Hellfire missile streaked through the air, hitting its mark and collapsing the cave entrance. Cannon fire shredded surrounding rocks to ensure no enemy could emerge. The valley, once a trap, was now a battlefield controlled entirely by Sarah's skill and strategy. Every potential threat had been neutralized. Finally, the valley fell. Silent, smoke and dust rose from destroyed positions. Debris littered the cliffs, and the enemy was shattered. The convoy had reached a secure location, its soldiers cheering and shouting their gratitude. Reyes let out a long, exhausted breath. "Sarah, we did it. Every last one is gone." Sarah's eyes scanned the terrain one last time, calm yet vigilant. "Not until we leave this zone completely secure," she said. Satisfaction flickered across her face. Mission accomplished, lives saved, and the impossible achieved. The soldiers cheered, radioing praise and admiration. "Mitchell's a legend," one shouted. Sarah allowed herself a brief nod, but remained focused. The Apache had been her weapon, shield, an extension of her will. The mission had tested every ounce of skill, courage, and endurance, yet she had emerged victorious. Her mastery of aerial combat had turned a deadly ambush into a decisive victory. Doubters who had whispered, "She can't," had been silenced by her performance. Even as the convoy moved toward safety, Sarah remained vigilant. Thermal imaging revealed no hidden threats, and every firing position had been neutralized. The Apache thrummed beneath her, a reminder of the power she controlled and the precision she commanded. She guided the helicopter to a high vantage point, surveying the valley one final time. Every last insurgent had been eliminated or scattered. The convoy was safe. The ambush had been dismantled. Sarah Mitchell had proven beyond doubt that skill, courage, and determination could transcend every limitation and expectation. By mid-afternoon, the valley was a testament to her skill and resilience. A once formidable enemy had been reduced to nothing more than memories, and the convoy soldiers could continue their journey safely. Sarah guided the Apache toward the base, her hands steady, her mind sharp, every instinct honed by hours of combat. Reyes looked at her in awe. "I've never seen anything like this. You're incredible." Sarah allowed herself a small smile, though her focus remained. The mission had been completed flawlessly, but she knew the real work, ensuring the convoy's complete security, was finished only when they reached home. The sun hung high over the valley, casting long shadows across the rocky slopes and shattered enemy positions. Smoke still rose from destroyed mortar and machine gun nests, and dust drifted lazily in the hot afternoon air. For the first time in hours, the roar of explosions and the deafening sound of cannon fire had ceased. Sarah Mitchell hovered the Apache above the valley floor, scanning every ridge, every crevice, every potential hiding place. The convoy had passed the worst, but vigilance was still necessary. The enemy was scattered, but even a single straggler could pose a lethal threat. Lieutenant Reyes exhaled shakily, glancing at the exhausted yet unshakable pilot beside him. "Sarah, I can't believe it. Every last one. Gone?" His disbelief mingled with awe. Sarah's eyes remained fixed on the valley below, scanning for thermal signatures and movement. "Not until the zone is completely secure," she said. Firmly, her hands moved instinctively over the controls, guiding the Apache with precision as it glided above the valley like a predator surveying its territory. Every instinct, every training exercise, every split-second decision had led to this moment. The convoy reached a safer plateau, its soldiers finally able to breathe freely. Cheers erupted, echoing across the cliffs and into the valley. Soldiers radioed praise, calling out their gratitude. "Mitchell's a hero. She saved every single one of us," one shouted. Sarah allowed herself a small nod, though she didn't take her eyes off the landscape. She knew the mission wasn't about glory. It was about precision, control, and the safety of the soldiers under her protection. Every life mattered, and she had ensured none were lost. Even as the soldiers celebrated, Sarah's attention remained on the remaining enemy forces. Small heat signatures flickered in hidden caves and crevices, last-ditch attempts at survival. She methodically deployed Hellfire missiles, targeting each position with exacting accuracy. Cannon fire shredded rocks and debris to prevent any enemy from regrouping or striking again. The valley, once a deadly trap for the convoy, had been transformed into a battlefield under her total control. Every move had been calculated, every threat eliminated, every life in the convoy preserved. Hours of relentless combat had forged a bond between Sarah and the Apache, an unspoken connection that elevated them to a single unit of unmatched power. She rolled the helicopter low over the cliffs, dipping under natural overhangs, and unleashed controlled bursts of cannon fire on hidden squads attempting to flee. The insurgents' last attempts at resistance were annihilated in seconds. Dust and debris filled the air, smoke curled from destroyed positions, and the valley fell silent. Sarah hovered for a moment, ensuring no threat remained before allowing herself a brief moment of reflection. Lieutenant Reyes shook his head in amazement. "You've just changed everything, Sarah. They'll never doubt a woman in an Apache again." Sarah allowed herself a tired, small smile. "They won't," she replied. "But it's not about proving them wrong. It's about finishing the mission, protecting lives, and doing what's right." The Apache thrummed beneath her, responding to her every thought, every instinct. The battlefield was cleared, the convoy safe, and the impossible had been achieved. Through courage, skill, and precision, the valley now bore the scars of destruction-cratered slopes, shattered rocks, and smoldering remnants of enemy positions. Yet in its destruction, there was a sense of triumph. Sarah guided the Apache low, allowing the convoy to catch up and regroup. Soldiers waved and cheered, their relief and admiration palpable. "Captain Mitchell, you saved us all," one called out. She nodded once, keeping her focus on securing the area completely. Every last enemy had to be neutralized before the mission could truly be declared a success. Her eyes caught movement near the cliffs, one remaining insurgent trying to flee. Without hesitation, Sarah swooped low, firing a Hellfire missile that obliterated the position. Cannon bursts shredded, rocks nearby preventing any possible return fire. The valley, once a lethal ambush site, was now fully under her control. Every potential threat had been eliminated. Reyes could barely keep up with the rapid-fire actions and split-second maneuvers. "How? How do you do it?" he asked, awe evident in his voice. Sarah only shook her head, focusing on the final sweep of the area. By late afternoon, the valley was entirely secure. The convoy had reached safe ground, its soldiers alive and unharmed. The Apache hovered above, engines humming, as Sarah conducted one final scan for threats. The battle had been brutal, intense, and relentless, but her skill had ensured victory. Her mastery of the Apache, combined with tactical genius and unshakable focus, had turned a near-impossible ambush into a total triumph. Every soldier in the convoy owed their lives to her precision, courage, and unwavering determination. Reyes exhaled, exhaustion and admiration mingling on his face. "I've never seen anything like this. You're incredible." Sarah allowed herself a brief smile. "We do what we have to do. The mission isn't about being incredible. It's about surviving, protecting, and finishing the job." The Apache descended, returning to a safe hover above the plateau as the convoy prepared to continue. The valley, once a trap that could have cost countless lives, now stood as a testament to her skill and resilience. Soldiers below waved and shouted their thanks as the Apache touched down lightly nearby. Sarah powered down the cannons, running final system checks while scanning the surrounding terrain. Every last insurgent had been eliminated or scattered, every potential ambush point neutralized. She stepped out briefly, surveying the wreckage and destruction. The convoy soldiers approached, clapping her on the shoulder, shaking her hand, and expressing gratitude she had earned through sweat, nerves, and precision. She nodded, acknowledging them quietly. Heroism wasn't about words, it was about results. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light over the valley, revealing the full extent of the battle. Smoke curled lazily, and debris littered the rocky cliffs, each mark telling a story of survival, skill, and courage. Sarah stood by the Apache, watching the convoy regroup and move forward. In the midst of chaos, she had maintained clarity, precision, and control. Her actions had rewritten the rules of what was possible, proving beyond doubt that skill, courage, and determination were far more important than gender, expectations, or stereotypes. Lieutenant Reyes finally spoke again, awe in his voice. "Captain Mitchell, today, you didn't just win the battle, you saved lives, destroyed an entire battalion, and proved what's possible. They'll be talking about this mission for years." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "It's not about being remembered," she replied. "It's about making sure everyone comes home alive. That's all that matters." The Apache thronged beneath her, silent now, yet powerful, a symbol of her skill, mastery, and unshakable. Focused as the convoy continued to move toward safety, Sarah finally allowed herself to exhale. Hours of intense combat had tested every ounce of her skill, courage, and endurance. Yet through precision, focus, and relentless determination, she had dominated the battlefield. The insurgents were gone, the convoy safe, and every challenge had been met and overcome. She stepped into the cockpit one last time, feeling the bond between pilot and machine, knowing that together they had achieved the impossible. By evening, the valley lay quiet. The battle was over, the convoy safe, and the Apache resting beside its pilot. Soldiers recounted the events, praising her skill, courage, and determination. News would spread quickly. Sarah Mitchell had rewritten history that day. She had proven that ability, training, and determination mattered more than any limitation imposed by others. Her legacy was now cemented, not just as a pilot, but as a force capable of extraordinary feats in the face of overwhelming danger. As the sun set over the valley, casting warm orange light across the landscape, Sarah Mitchell allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had faced the impossible, emerged victorious, and ensured that every life in the convoy was safe. The battle had been brutal, relentless, and unforgiving, but she had triumphed through skill, focus, and courage. The Apache had been more than a machine. It had been an extension of her will, a partner in battle, and together they had conquered the impossible.